Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Graham Linehan, who's an Irish guy, does a lot of TV, and also did a lot of activism over the past, I think, probably about a decade, probably 6 years or so. He started out being on one side of Gamergate and then ended up on an opposite side with regards to the gender issue. And we talk about his being kicked off of Twitter and how that's changed the way that he approaches these issues. We talk about the issues themselves, and we talk a little bit more about Gamergate and his changed and ever-evolving stance on the way in which ethics in media journalism is impacting cultural narratives. Great conversation. The third in as many years, or I guess maybe I could say that, but yeah, I think about 3 in 3 years so far. So without further ado, here is Graham Linehan. Your tornado style?
Yeah. If that means that the tornado being the gender wars,
Do you consider yourself a Dorothy in that particular tornado?
It is extraordinary. I mean, I don't know. Have we started?
Well, we can whenever. I'll cut in. We can we can do niceties. Okay. I mean,
yeah, I do think of it as in fairy tale terms. A lot of the time. I recently did an address to the House of Lords about it.
Yes, and I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I realized that I only had I had a huge opportunity. So I said everything. I said everything I could think of to do with this subject. But the one of the things I said is that, people are under a spell, and it's a very simple spell that was cast as soon as the words trans women are women became common currency. Because once you say that some men are women, some males, let's say, to try not to be offensive, some males are women, then you cast a magic spell over the whole of society, and we're currently suffering the results of that.
Did you voluntarily dispense with Twitter, or did you?
Oh no, I was banned.
Okay.
I was banned. My last tweet was "Men aren't women," though, which I should have known because I did it on a trans day of something. But the thing is, every day is a trans day of something. So they get you whatever you do, So, but back to the magic spell. So yeah, I think once you upend a fundamental aspect of reality and of our language, then you do enter into a kind of a magical place, like Oz or beyond the looking glass, or Bluebeard's chamber. There's all sorts of kind of fairy tale aspects to this.
Do you? Well, before we get to solutions or possible ways of rewriting the world, like a part of our series is just kind of charting your work on the internet and going through just different phases of refining your views or your standpoint or your work, or noticing how things are acting and reacting to you. And, so what was it like to be outside of Twitter?
Well,
because you were doing a lot of work on Twitter, just to let the audience know. You're very on there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you'd call it work. I mean, I think what
war.
What Twitter turned me into was a kind of a treadmill. It put me on a treadmill of an outrage treadmill, and essentially, one thing I've found since I got off Twitter is just how many stories there are to do with gender identity. They keep happening. The most shocking examples of censorship and misogyny and men being placed in women's prisons and rape crisis centers being closed down. Three rape crisis, 3 shelters, women's shelters, were defunded in 1 week in the UK because they weren't doing enough for trans women, supposedly. So there's just always news. So on Twitter, it turned me into a kind of a kind of a lab rat, and I was just responding. I was just pressing the button over and over again. But since I got off Twitter, I've been much more effective with a much lower reach, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I've been writing longer pieces, doing interviews. I mean, now I've got like 100 YouTube interviews.
Yeah.
I do a regular YouTube thing with my friend Artie Morty, who is in the LGBT Alliance in Canada, and Helen Staniland, who was recently thrown off in the most disgraceful way. And, you know, it means that I get to step back, think of things more in a continuum, see the connections, and respond to it in a way that's I don't know. I think it's actually doing more good. You know, Twitter. I was just shouting all the time. It's just like, the house is on fire, and no one would believe me. And I think the reason no one believed me is because up until in my whole time on Twitter, I think I always had that. It was boy who cried wolf, you know. And I think that, you know, when you're reacting to things with outrage all the time, when something truly outrageous comes along, people can dismiss it. I'm not sure that's exactly what happened with me, but it was definitely an element of it, you know. It was hard to get across to people that I really do think the gender identity movement is it's a hinge moment in history for women's human rights, and it was hard to communicate it. People just wouldn't take you seriously, you know. But part of the problem there is simply because the stories are so unbelievable. People still don't believe, for instance, that men are being placed in women's prisons, you know. But it's happening, and people think, oh well, you know. I think what people always think is someone's in charge. So there's adults in a room somewhere who are taking care of all this. And the thing this has proved to me is there's you know, you can't assume there's adults in the room, you know. I mean, sorry, I hope this is okay, Ben. Just me rabbiting on because I've seen your interviews and you seem okay with it. But when you see someone like Rand Paul and Rachel and Levine. You know, I mean, I think he. Sorry, I'm jumping from subject to subject.
That's fine. So Rand Paul's a senator, or maybe a representative. I think he's a senator. I should know this. And there was Rachel Levine is the Biden's pick for, I guess, like a vice secretary of health, and they kind of had a standoff.
Yes, and it was extraordinary that Rand Paul asked twice whether she agreed with the giving of hormones to underage children, despite the fact that it you know, Keira Bell has won her case against a Tavistock, where she blamed them for putting her on a medical pathway that she did not realize was going to be the rest of her life, and the courts found in her favor, and Rand Paul asked twice this question, and twice Levine simply batted it away with a terrible, you know. In fact, Rand Paul said at the end of the second non-answer, "Let the record show that Ms. Levine has not answered the question." And then, you know, the kind of the upending of reality immediately happened, because the spokesperson, who I would imagine was a Democrat, or the chairperson, said, "Thank you for answering the question." So someone says, "Let the record show that this person didn't answer the question." And then the next person who speaks says, "Thank you for answering the question." And that's the kind of unreality that we're living in. But Rand Paul has something of my problem, in the sense that he's just spent the last 4 years defending Trump. So for him now, if he wants to be taken seriously, he's just got a slightly harder hill to climb, you know?
Yeah. This upending of reality, via the manipulation of our language, has profound consequences. So within the gender topic alone, we're seeing young people's bodies being altered medically and then permanently chained to the medical industry. We're seeing the rights of women being eroded. We're seeing the rights of men as well being eroded. We're seeing the ability to speak about matters of sexual health and sexual criminality being eroded. And that's just within one domain.
Yes.
You can't contain that. Once language starts being loosed from reality, you cannot contain that to just sex and gender. It will affect everything else. It will affect our entire system of reference to reality.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
there's a kind of like, not to minimize at all the gender topic, but it will strike at the root of our ability to make sense and then to have any sort of common cause together outside of being forced to agree with whoever's the most powerful person in the room.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that you are experiencing a similar thing in America, especially now with the kind of white fragility and all that sort of. I can't remember what's the name of those studies. Racial something studies. What's the term they use for?
Anti-racism, Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah, but Robin DiAngelo, let's use her as a shorthand. But yes, that kind of, and I think that what's basically happening is there's a line in Game of Thrones, the Littlefinger, the kind of genius politician, diplomat who plays sides against each other and is always looking for an opportunity. He says chaos is a ladder, and that's what I think is happening at the moment. I think that once you can call people, for instance, bigots for standing up for same-sex spaces, once you start referring to pedophiles and sex offenders as she, which is happening all the time in news reports, it's just expected now. Then you're creating a political system that only the very dexterous can manage. Only the little fingers of this world can figure out how to escape how to step over all the tripwires and how to climb up the crazy monkey bars of this debate without being cancelled, So those are the people who are thriving at the moment, and they're people who are just my favorite example over here is a UK journalist called Owen Jones, and Owen Jones was asked, would you sleep with a trans man? Would you sleep with a female identifying, a male identifying woman? And he said yes. So you have someone who's like supposedly a gay activist, gay man who's a very strong gay activist historically, who suddenly just throws away his homosexuality, just says, just kind of basically says it's a choice. It's a choice, If you're having sex with a masculine-looking woman, and you're a man, then you're straight. Do you know what I mean? There's no way around it. But he realized that answer would get him one rung higher on the monkey bars,
So you're saying that this chaos selects for the Machiavellis, and I'm using Machiavelli in the pejorative sense, kind of. It selects for people who are conniving, it selects for dishonesty. It selects for the cynical actor. It selects for somebody who is putting power over principle, I suppose.
Yes, and it is one of the things that I've had experience with is I tell this story a lot because it's so fascinating. But apparently, when policemen are looking for a criminal, if they are told that the criminal has gone to a shopping center, the first thing they will do, if they have the criminal's car registration and type, they will look for the car in all the handicap spaces, because criminals love using handicap spaces, because their attitude is, why the fuck would you not use this space? It's right there. Only idiots don't use it. I'm not an idiot. I'm going to do this, right? So there's a criminal mindset. there's obviously a criminal mindset. So what you have is an ideology that as soon as a certain criminal mindset sees it, they will say, well, of course I'm going to take advantage of this. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I? You've got people who, I always said if Trump, I used to say, Trump is the kind of person who, if it really comes to it, he might have to identify as a woman. I could see him dressing up as a woman just to get out of the White House without being arrested. But it is a criminal mindset to take advantage of woolly thinking, of people's goodwill, of people who are trying to be kind and nice. Yeah, you're going to get criminals taking advantage of that.
Well, it puts them beyond questioning.
Yes,
you can no longer question their intentions. You have to give them a very big benefit of the doubt, give them leeway to do whatever they want to a certain extent.
Absolutely. I mean, the person who I think is more central. I have a phrase called central outliers, by which I mean we're often accused, us gender critical types of taking bad examples, of taking people who are bad eggs and tarring every trans person with the same brush. But the point is, we don't need to do this, and we don't do this because, there's lots of trans people who are on our side. You've spoken to many of them. But the central outliers thing means that the very people we're worried about are actually central to this movement. I'll give you a very good example. Morgan Page. Morgan Page is the person who ran Benji's trans youth group that you interviewed her about, yes, where she said that much older men were starting what she felt were inappropriate relationships with young trans men who were in, 16, 17 years old. Morgan Page ran that group. Morgan Page is also the person who ran the group Overcoming the Cotton Ceiling, mm-hmm, which was about identifying boundaries and strategizing ways of overcoming them. This person
specifically to get into lesbians' pants.
Yes, lesbian into the dating pool. This person has a web page, in Stonewall. Stonewall are the big LGBT charity over here, and Morgan Page is one of their. I believe he was made a leader, whatever that means. But he's still there. There's absolutely no shame on Stonewall's part, and you can imagine how insulting and rapey that is to lesbians to have that person in there. But they don't even think of it as a problem, So you have these people who I think are central outliers in the sense that they are right at the heart of these movements, and they are exactly what we are worried about. Amy Challoner is another example. I don't know if you know about Amy Challoner.
Could you remind me?
Oh my God!
Or Clymer? Is that Charlotte Clymer? That's a different person.
No, Charlotte Clymer is different. Charlotte Clymer is hilarious for different reasons, but Amy Challoner was on the Trans Advisory Group at Stonewall in the UK, then worked for the Greens. While with the Greens, employed their father as an election agent after it was found out that the father had sexually abused a young girl in the attic of their home, a 12-year-old girl in the attic of their home. Amy Challoner was chucked out of the Greens for this because never told anyone, huge safeguarding problems there. Then went straight to the Lib Dems, who were just as kind of trans crazy as every other liberal political group in the UK. Welcomed her with open arms. Sorry, I'm saying her just because it's so confusing, But he's a trans-identified male. Welcomed Challoner with open arms. Then Challoner's husband, Nathaniel Knight, who's 14 years older than Challoner and lives in America, announces that he's a paedophile. He writes short stories about very young preteens. I can't believe I'm saying that. I mean, this is just so extraordinary. So then we're following, Challoner's political route. He goes to America. Chandler goes to America, signs up with Elizabeth Warren's campaign. Elizabeth Warren loses, jumps onto Joe Biden's campaign. And the next thing we hear is that Chandler has signed an open letter to Reddit saying that there are groups on Reddit which are transphobic and hateful and they must be gotten rid of. So they lose groups like D-Trans, R-D-Trans, True Lesbians, are Gender Critical, which had 65,000 people on it, right? Yeah. No small amount. So they lose all these accounts. And now Reddit have given her a paying gig. She's actually a paid moderator on Reddit, you know? And this is someone who is married to a self-admitted pedophile. So when we talk about these people who we're worried about, we're not talking about, we're not doing what they call nut picking. We're not just choosing outliers who are very unrepresentative of what's going on. We are choosing people who are central and who have incredible amounts of influence, and are silencing women by the thousands. So anyway, yeah.
Well, you see that on Twitter, as I've shown, and as you know, where what happened when Biden became president, the first order of business was attacking the rights of women.
I know, yeah.
and then instituting critical race theory. Okay, whatever. And women on Reddit, women on Twitter stood up to that. They started hashtag Biden erases women, which then started trending, and then TERF started trending, and they started having that war. TRAs and TERF started having that war. And Twitter took the side of the trans lobby and started to contextualize what Biden erases women. And then the next day, when that was gone, then Twitter boosts up, looks pretty artificially, Roe v. Wade. So they try to throw a bone to women's bodies afterward, forget all about the trans thing, forget all about this, this particular ideological war.
Yeah,
it happens over and over again. And Scared Straight is a perfect, or not Scared Straight, Super Straight is another example. It got wildly popular on Reddit and on Twitter and on TikTok. Reddit and TikTok yanked it. Twitter was a little bit wiser and let it run its course and probably suppressed it in the back end. So we know that it's that this narrative or this ideology or whatever we want to call it does have very powerful sway over our modes of communication.
Absolutely. Did you hear about the latest? I don't think anything scared me as much as Amazon's recent announcement that they won't be carrying books that refer to gender identity in relation to gender dysphoria at all.
Yeah, they will not carry books that refer to gender dysphoria as a disorder or any sort of trans as a disorder, but they still carry the DSM, which is what defines it as a disorder for insurance purposes. So it's like,
but this is their way of making sure that they don't have to carry another Abigail Schreier book, or they don't have to carry, like for instance, actually I better not say that. There's something in the future that I'm planning, but.
We'll just drop that little Easter egg then. Let it people's brains.
But they are looking for a way that they can say, my favorite thing about this is the way left wing people go along with this. But they're looking for a way they can say, "Oh, sorry, you broke our rules. Our rules are very important, and you can't break our rules." And it's just hilarious the way left wingers suddenly decide they love corporations when they start arguing for the enforcement of these rules. It's extraordinary.
Corporations have been very good at adapting to leftist rhetoric or leftish values, at least social values, co-opting them and then enforcing their power. Which is the question. The question is, if there is enough people that stand up for this, that are stronger, louder, and more thorough than this trans lobby or the gender ideology lobby, will the corporations turn on a dime and just follow the money?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we need to define our terms. Obviously, gender dysphoria is a very, I think it exists. Some people, I know some feminists who don't, but I think it does exist, but I think it's very rare and I think it's very extreme. However, I think a form of gender dysphoria is spreading via the internet. In two ways. I think that and I think both ways are to do with pornography. I think young girls are trying to escape from pornography, so they are trying to become boys, and I think young men are escaping into pornography, and they are becoming the kind of their vision of what women are, which is a pornified version, you know. So, you know, I think that. I think that the latter, the you know, what you might call ROGD, which what's that, rapid onset gender dysphoria, I think that is caused by the internet, and I think that needs a very urgent conversation about what's happening to us as a society, because I think that it's happening without us really realizing. It's almost like evolution, you know. And you can combine it as well with things like, you know, OnlyFans accounts, young girls, young boys who are realizing they can make money if they masturbate on screen, you know, and it's like proper end of capitalism stuff. It's grim. It's really, really grim. But this is all being presented in one bundle, so that's very hard to unpick. Okay. So you have someone who has gender dysphoria to such an extreme extent that they have to have surgery to get it sorted out, right? I know some people like that, and you know, yeah, we all do. But and my worry is that because we are not able to untangle these different forces that are at play at the moment, you know, we're losing sight of how to actually help the people who are really suffering from dysphoria. You know, I'm sure you know that statistic that most people who have gender dysphoria, it goes away. You know, especially young people, if they go through puberty, it resolves.
And a large portion of them are homosexual and in terms of their body and their sexuality, and then move forward.
A large portion of people are identifying as trans. Yeah. But the thing about it is, puberty is a cure for dysphoria. You know, and now you've got all these ideological actors who are telling kids that the important thing to do is to stop their puberty. You know.
Yeah.
One of the few cures we know for this stuff, you know. So I can't remember my original point because I'm frazzled. But
I have a really disturbing thought that you made me think of. You're tickling my creative writing, my speculative fiction, my perverse speculative fiction brain. What if? So Ellen Page becomes Elliot Page, gets a bunch of press, goes on hormones, gets some surgeries, or to whatever degree she wants to transition. He wants to transition now. And then detransitions, cashes in on the back end in a year when it's all fizzling out, brings a bunch of attention to this thing. Maybe it's the long play for lesbian rights to show how, because as Katie Herzog has written, scads of lesbians are now identifying as males. There is this huge erosion of lesbian culture and lesbianism because of the trans gateway or whatever that is. And she writes about that. I'm sure there's a multiplicity of reasons to that, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, apparently one girl was interviewed and she said, lesbian is a porn category and who wants to be that? You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's I don't know. There's so much to unpick in it. And the worst is we're being told we can't talk about it at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a free speech issue. We got that. It's also, I think that the effects of porn, the effects of social alienation through the internet and capitalism, how that's fueling it all. But it seems like there's a values argument to be made. And the first values argument is, okay, what is reality and how do we talk about that? You know, and then what is kindness and how do we flower up our language so that we don't offend people to a certain degree, but still be connected to reality. But also when you bring up pornography, you bring up women escaping from porn, boys escaping into porn. You can split that into two. Well, what do boys need to learn, or how have we failed our boys in giving them the correct values to maintain control over their desire so it doesn't pervert into their identity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think one of the major impediments to teaching boys to basically our sex lives should be compartmentalized. They should be private. The taboo against kink shaming, I think, is a real problem. I think people should be kink shamed. I'm not even real kinky people, but furries. I don't think furries should be given much leeway.
Okay, wait. If our sex lives should be private, isn't kink shaming, that's a public activity? So what
Yes,
do you mean?
but it's only public because all these sexual identities are so public themselves.
Okay.
I mean, it's part of one of the problems is that in a weird way, it's a good thing that happened, but Pride started off as a sexual rights event, but then somewhere along the line, corporations got involved. It became kind of softened, and suddenly you see kids at Pride. But there's still the kind of remnants of what Pride originally started as. So you get these terrible photos of children holding the leads of men who dress as dogs for BDSM purposes. So Pride has this kind of schizophrenic thing going on where it doesn't know what it is anymore. It's either a celebration of gay sex in all its kind of forms, including BDSM and kink and all that sort of thing, or it's a family day out. And the thing is, it can't be both. It can't be both, because when it's both, you get into the area of boundaries being blurred, and I know that's like one of the aims of queer theory.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah,
that's they think explicit aim.
Yeah, they want those boundaries to be blurred. But I disagree with queer theory, and I want those boundaries to be very, very secure. Because when those boundaries are secure, it makes safeguarding easier, which is, safeguarding should be as easy as possible. There should be it shouldn't be complicated. You shouldn't be able to confuse safeguarding, and safeguarding at the moment is terribly confused. Over in the UK, I've interviewed leaders of girl guiding, which is the version of the girls. I don't know what they call Girl Scouts over there, but I've interviewed girl guiding leaders who lost their girl guiding troops because they questioned the advice that was being given to them that men who identified as women were automatically exempt from safeguarding rules that would be applied to men. So not only could they come on, for instance, weekends where they're sleeping over with girls, but you weren't allowed to tell the parents. Not just, you wouldn't just not inform them, you weren't allowed to tell the parents. So this is safeguarding destroyed in girl guiding. It's absolutely nuked. And, again, it's one of those things like the sports thing I was saying earlier, but, how is it not a scandal? How are people not charging through the streets and banging on windows about this stuff,
It seems like it's controlled. The opposition is controlled to that or silenced. It's snuck in. I think that there was a lot of erosion of... I think mores, or normativity itself has shifted a lot over the past generation, and I don't know. I think people just got into the habit of expecting it to shift, and expecting it to shift, and not having, the legs were cut out from under the conservative side of things when they lost gay marriage, and
yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
I'm not arguing for. The repeal of that, but once that dropped, like how do they regain their breaks anymore?
Well, isn't it interesting? I'd love to talk to you about. I really want to talk about Gamergate with you, actually, because my feelings on Gamergate have really changed, and but you're leading me to think about it. But before we move on to that, I just want to point out that don't you think there's a sense in which the great battles that the right and the left lost drove them both slightly insane? Like, when you think of the left at the moment, I think the left, when Trump got in and when Brexit passed, I'm just talking about the UK and America for the moment, but when those two things happened, it seemed to me that the left went nuts, completely nuts. And I think it was like almost like they said, you know what, we're just going to create our own reality where Trump isn't in power, where Brexit didn't happen, and now we're just going to say, we're just going to decide on certain things. And it worked, you know, the left, like I always thought that it was a right-wing trope that the left controlled the media. But now you've got the media, you've got Amazon literally saying they won't stock books by you know, basically what they're saying is we won't stock books by gender critical authors, you know. They've created a reality that they can live within. Same with Trump and you know, the kind of
QAnon and the conspiracy theorists and yes. Alternative facts and fake news and the entire thing. It's all in hyper reality postmodern mode in a way.
Yes. And climate change. I remember when climate change, the big joke that you used to see amongst American right-wing senators was they would say, "Well, I'm not a scientist." They would get around answering basic questions by saying, "Well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know." But the left-wing version of that was, I don't know when it happened. It was very recent, but someone asked, I can't remember who it was, if there was more than two sexes. It just happened the other day. Do you know who this was?
I can't remember. We can look it up though. But
it was some guy and couldn't answer the question. Couldn't answer the question as to how many sexes there were. So the right and the left have both gone in their tribal ways insane. And what you have now, I think, is a tiered reality. You know, not just one or two, but many tiered realities. You've got QAnon on one, going along one track. You've got gender identity going on another track. You've got white fragility going on another track. And none of these can work with each other. They can never join. Because I, for instance, Ben, I will never accept, for instance, that a rapist can be a woman. I will never accept that. I will never call a misogynist she. Never. You know, so these things cannot go together. And I really do worry. I said in my speech to the House of Lords, you know, a world where men are not women is hate speech, is a world on the brink of chaos. So I think the discussions that we're in, you know, Jesus, they may be the last discussions we have on this stuff, because the next thing is burning buildings.
I think you're very right. If our worldviews are they can't track, that means we can't talk. And without conversation, there's only violence. There's only brute power. That's the only thing left.
And not just that, but even people who, like Kara Dansky, who she was in Wolf. I can't remember the name of the organization she's with now.
Women's Liberation Front.
Yeah, she organized the recent march on DC. For Women's Day. But she said she had a friend who she was trying to explain the arguments about being gender critical and stuff. And the friend put her fingers in her ears. And you know what? I've had that happen to me too. I've had someone go, no, like that, and put their hands over their ears, because they're so frightened, because they know that if they take their fingers off their ears, the information might go in and they will be socially, ostracized the way I was, you know? So it's an extraordinary moment in history, you know, and it's all the internet.
Yeah.
I used to love the internet. And then and that brings me back to Gamergate, right? So I want to talk about this a little bit, because you said something last time we spoke. You said something along the lines of, I don't know. What was your relation to Gamergate when it happened? Were you involved in it in any way?
I wasn't involved on Twitter. I was mopping up news in a kind of sequestered zone of Reddit called Kotaku in Action, and I was watching the arguments proliferate to keep activists, or to call activists out on their crap, basically. Right. And then pointing to how activists in Kotaku in Action, it was, I really enjoyed it because it was more than just gaming. It was showing the advance of activism throughout all of media and shaping the entire narrative. And that's when I was saying, okay, the powers that be are not to be trusted in the media, at least. So that was my end for that.
You see, I was a until the gender stuff happened, I was very proud of my place in Gamergate. I thought I was great. And I look back at it now with a fair amount of shame, because I now realise there were lots of people within Gamergate who really did think it was about journalism. And I think that some of them were right. I think sometimes it was about journalism, and I think sometimes it was about ethics, which is the type of thing that will get me crucified, because it was such a cliche, the ethics in game journalism argument.
Yeah.
But I look at that now as, I remember, for instance, the sneering disdain with which I treated people who were talking about Gamergate in any other way than as a hate crime movement against women, or a hate movement against women. That's all I thought it was, And I now realize that it was a lot of different things with a lot of different actors. Again, there were a lot of chaos agents within it.
Yeah.
There were people who were dead, like Milo, for instance. He said that he was using it to recruit young men to the right. Okay. So I took against all that stuff. I always had a vision. I always had a feeling that the right were evil and the left were great. And so I remember adopting some of these sneering kind of reactions. I would never engage. I would just use, a kind of shorthand disdain that had the same kind of like ethics in gaming journalism became a joke, and you would use that as a joke against people and so on. And I now realize that these things were like catchphrases or memes. I don't know what you would call them, along the same lines as some of the things you see in the gender debate. Like they're, phrases like no debate, arguments like you're debating our right to exist. All these things, they are not really thinking. They are a substitute for thinking. They make people feel like intellectuals, but they are actually a very, very poor, replacement for actually engaging with things. And I worry about it now, because I think at the time I didn't realize how many solar systems there were on the internet, and how they were, where the vectors were converging. I didn't realize that there were good people and bad people. And one of the examples I would say is Brianna Wu, who I've seen attacking Jesse Singal recently, with bogus accusations of Jesse Singal,
stalking people and grooming, I think, maybe.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Brianna Wu is just a liar, just a complete liar. And while I was defending Brianna Wu, which I would do with great gusto, I thought Brianna Wu was a woman. And Brianna Wu is a trans-identified male. And never really made that clear. And words like misogyny were coming up. So I thought I was defending women against men. I guess I have a white knight complex. That's my thing. I don't like seeing women being bullied. I heard about things during Gamergate, like swatting on women and all that sort of stuff, And I'm sure you agree, there was definitely a right-wing kind of edgelord adoption of it as a cause. But the thing is, I now realize that there were people who I was defending to the hilt who were just terrible people, liars and spreaders of malicious gossip, and Brianna was a terrible person. Just a terrible person. And I thought I was defending this woman who was being abused online, So yeah, anyway.
Have you made amends with Shoe on Head? Do you remember that? That's what one of the famous.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I haven't made amends with Shoe on Head, but I don't trust any of the things that I thought about these people now. I don't know what their story is. Another person I think I gave a really rough time to. In fact, I think I wrote to you saying, "What are you interviewing this person for?" Was
Ian Chung?
Yeah. you know? I mean, you know, like I remember seeing a thing that's saying he was a Nazi, and it was some stuff that he posted when he was younger and so on, you know? And I look at that now and I think, but that's what they always do. They find something and they just, you just don't know what the truth of a person is, you know?
So here's the question then. How do we, as internet actors who want to be doing it correctly, of course, we want to be on the right side of whatever issue we are, but like there's the ethos, and then there's the tactics. You know, there's the questioning, like, what side am I on? What are my values? And then, but how am I going to be in the world? And then what am I going to allow myself to do and avoid doing? And then there's also, how do I evaluate other people as good actors or bad actors, good players or poor players? And like, so if we go to that level, to what degree you think that Twitter molded your communication style, your ethos, and your tactics, and to what degree you think you're moving towards a better without that tool? Like,
oh well, you know, I think yes, it molded my tactics. I think another part of my personality is that I used to believe in the idea of there being cool people in the world. You know? Yeah. You know, I thought some people were just cool, you know? And then I saw those same people who I thought were so cool calling women TERFs. And I realized, oh man, they're just fucking, I call them Jenny's boyfriend, you know? Jenny and Forrest Gump, who beat her up, you know? They're Jenny's boyfriend, left-wing misogynists, you know? And, you know, and also not just that, but all the people who were friends with me and I've given jobs to and sometimes made them famous. And you know, I got to be careful because some people have been lovely and behind the scenes have been very sympathetic, but there's a lot of people who just kind of completely deserted me, you know. So there's my whole idea of the cool person has taken a huge blow. Sorry, I'm not. That's
it seems like
what you asked.
The culture shifted too far. It went too far for you, and the whole system. And then there's a lot of people who can't afford to let go of that system, who are invested in it for one way or another. You did your calculation and you say, I can't stomach this. I'm stopping here. And then they just keep on, the whole thing just keeps on moving.
Maybe that's an interesting way of putting it. Have you ever heard of the sunk costs fallacy? Do you know of this? Well, you know, it's and there's some people, right, who they went so far in the misogynistic attacks on women that they're stuck in there now. Like there's a guy in Ireland who's like this very obviously very disturbed person, and he's just staked his whole life on abusing women and trans people who disagree with him. You know, there's no way back for him. So he is going to fight to the bitter end. You know, there's a phrase that Stella O'Malley gave me, who's a psychotherapist over here or over in Ireland, and she calls it the Golden Bridge, and it's like a quote from The Art of War, where Sun Tzu says that if you have your enemy surrounded, you must give them a golden bridge to retreat across, because if you don't, they will fight to the death. You know, and the sad thing about this particular argument is, even if we provide the golden bridge, they won't retreat across it, because they've made themselves. I mean, this person I'm thinking of in Ireland, he's over. You know, he doesn't realize it yet. He's like Yosemite Sam when he's walking on air and doesn't look down. You know, he's just destroyed his life by being a psychotic bully online. And it's only a matter of time before people realize this, you know. So there's some people who will fight to the bitter end, and you know, it's going to be very ugly. It's going to be very ugly.
So it seems like the consistency within your internet arc is a deep reverence for women that manifests in different climates, but that seems to be the key there. Is that? Yeah,
I don't like being bullied. I was bullied at school, so I don't like bullies. And
you were a bully?
No, I was bullied, and I may have bullied myself. You know, in terms of taking revenge on the people I thought were bullies, but sometimes that flips over into something else. And that could also be, something that you could accuse me of, especially during Gamergate and so on. But yeah, it's a combination of liking women and hating bullies, and hating the bullies who bully women most of all. I mean, as far as women go, I'm not perfect. I've treated women badly the way any heterosexual man has. I've made mistakes, and there's things I really regret and things I wish I could take back, and so on and so forth. But as a general rule, I was always taught that you protect women when they're being attacked. That's what you do if you're a man. I know for some reason people have managed to convince themselves that women are actually as strong physically as men. It's not true. They are more vulnerable. They are terrified of male violence, and they have every right to be. So, you got to look out for them. It's basic. So yeah, that's what it all comes down to, really. Just an idea of what a man does. Which I like all that. I'm very gender conforming in that sense. I want to be a good man.
So, do you think that you're formulating now that you're no longer distilled or channeled or funneled into the sentence format of Twitter, and now you're doing blogs and a whole lot of interviews? You're in a long form, a longer format. Are you beginning to grapple with like a systematic way of thinking about the gender ideology, the history, the tactics, and then the solutions to it, or the proper counters? Or are you beginning to form like a larger basis to contextualize your activity?
Not at the moment. I mean, at the moment, I think that the way I see it at the moment is I see it as like midway, like 1942, 1943. The end is not in sight. It might be the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, but we're still at war. It's like so bad. I mean, another bit of tech censorship recently was the super straight crowdfunder for Vancouver rape relief. No, Vancouver rape relief.
Oh yeah,
they shut it down. They shut it down. A crowdfunder for a rape relief center. So that's what I mean when I say we're in the middle of the war. So for me, it's just firefighting at the moment. It's like, oh shit, another fire's broken out. We got to go over and deal with that, and then another one, and then another one. So I don't really have a longer term. The only long term principle I have is that I now realize that, not just women's rights, but every right we have is it's not something you can relax about. You have to stand up. You have to fight. I know your thing is freedom of speech. I never really thought freedom of speech was vital. I didn't think it was a fight that. I know it's vital, but I didn't think it was under threat. And it wasn't until I got into the gender debate that I realized, oh my God, it really is, and it is to the extent that they're silencing women. They're silencing one half of the population, and they silence you as well. I know they defunded some of your YouTube videos and so on.
They play games.
Yeah.
I fly under the radar. I don't get petitioned like some people I know.
Yes. But I can't. There's certain things I just can't do. There's certain kind of. I know if I start a crowdfunder, it'll be targeted. When I went on the House of Lords, there were lots of letters about it. When I make. One person in a theatre over in the UK said if the Father Ted musical ever opens, they'll boycott it to the ground. So it's. Freedom of speech has come for me. The debate, the problem has come for me. But my thing is, I do think it's tied to women. I think the fight is more primal than just a freedom of speech, if that makes sense. I think men v women, and even if men are not participating in it, even if men are trying to help, it's still men who are the problem in this. It's still men who are making the push. They're trying to regain a lot of territory that they lost. Like women's sports is a great example. You've got mediocre men. It's like a revolution of mediocre men in women's sport.
Oh no. Yeah, I don't want to get too mean in this particular interview, but there's some things to be said.
The mean
I
thing is,
mean, if you're willing to give up your dignity to that extent, I mean, maybe you should get a couple knocks.
yeah, but then remember the parking place in the supermarket. You know, these people they don't care about their dignity. That Laurel Hubbard guy who breaks world records in
Deadlifting or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the brilliant thing about him is he seems to have broken his arm because he's obviously not really a professional. So he's kind of you know, his career has ended because of his hubris. But you know, I don't think it's mean pointing these people out. That's a con man. He's a con man who's taking advantage of a ridiculous situation to steal a place on a podium from a woman. You know, so I don't accept the mean thing of that.
Yeah, well, the problem is that they've muzzled shame. Our society is no longer able to shame anymore because it's the worst sin, and then that leads to shamelessness of people like having no bounds anymore because it's not polite to shame people. But it's okay to shame people who are shaming people. You could totally run them aground and call them the worst names in the book if they're violating that principle.
And it's also the targets are so arbitrary. You know, I mean, I know one of the reasons why people might not be quick to defend me in celebrity circles would be because all people have to do is run a search on their tweets with a few keywords and see if they've ever said anything that could get them cancelled, you know, and then that's it. They're done, you know. I mean, if I was a young comedian now, I would immediately delete my entire Twitter history because it's like that. I can't remember who said it. Was it Richelieu? Who said something like, "Give me 3 letters by someone."
Give me 6 sentences or something like that, and I'll come down.
6 sentences, and I will destroy them. Something like that. Now we've got like a novel work, or like Le Recherche de Perdue size, you know, volumes of stuff to choose from. You know what I mean?
He's perfectly decontextualized because we're constantly thinking in a decontextualized manner too. Nobody asks about.
Yes,
nobody asks about purpose.
All little snippets of things, you know, like I'm in a legal battle at the moment, and the solicitors have a real problem with it because, you know, it's just lines, and the tweet above it and the tweet below it are gone, and Twitter bans some of the people in the conversation, so you just see spaces. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Weird. Crazy.
You know, we won't be able to reconstruct this time because it'll be so what's the word? Not disparate. You know, bitty. I can't remember what the word. But atomized, that's the word.
Yes.
So atomized. You know, we won't know what the hell was going on in the future. You know, cave paintings give you a better idea.
How's your creative life?
Pretty good. I'm writing prose for something that I'm really enjoying. I'm doing a bit of script editing, which I always like doing. I like getting other people's scripts and, you know, sorting them out. You know, sometimes it's often very simple what you have to do to them. And you know, the heavy lifting has been done, so you can just make scenes come to life a bit more. So that's always fun. So yeah, creatively, I'm doing great. But to be honest with you, the thing I'm surprised by is how much I love being a journalist. I started life as a journalist, but I wasn't even a proper journalist. I was a film critic and a music critic. So I was just writing whatever the fuck came into my head when I listened to an album. But with this, I have to cover stories, cover them carefully, you know, get quotes and get like proof and all that sort of thing. And I'm really, really enjoying it, you know.
This is just for your blog, or is it?
Yeah, you know, like we found out the stuff about Amy Challoner. We've got all the proof about her boyfriend. You know, we've you know, there's various different people who are, I think, dangerous, and we're constantly bringing attention to them. So yeah, I feel really energized by all that. You know, it's a good mission, I think, in life. You know, and I've come full circle, you know, and going back to journalism, and I like it, you know.
And now you're practicing ethics in journalism.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah,
That's the question. Do you think that it will a need will develop for new journalistic outlets? Do you think that the institutions of journalism have been compromised, at least in the United Kingdom?
well, yeah. I mean, Substack is an interesting example, isn't it? All these cancelled writers suddenly have Substacks and they're doing very well. But I think the problem with that is going to be market saturation after a while. I think what you might find with Substack is Substack might actually start going into magazines rather than, be more like individual Huffington Posts, you know what I mean, or individual feminist, not feminist current, things like that. I think you'll find that you'll get
coalitions of writers.
Yes, I think you might, and I think that's going to be very healthy as well if that happens, because you look at the Onion. It was such a joy when it first started. I think you might find people getting together and thinking, hey, why don't we do a Substack? There's a kind of we'll put the show on right here element to it, because opening up a Substack is like opening up a Medium site, except with the advantage that you won't get banned arbitrarily.
So far. They're petitioning for that.
Well, they're trying. I know they're trying, but I think that Substack would have a real problem on their hands if they censored people, because they're this free speech platform. That's part of their identity.
I wonder. Do you know the history of journalism? I guess that would be a question for somebody who has studied that. But it'd be interesting to see how the current outlets or the current dominant forms, where they got their start. And then, how they built up their cred that is now being, kind of exercised away from them or excised away.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. One thing that you find that journalists are doing at the moment is that they are, like I saw a thing today, we're just talking about the Onion, but the AV Club just ran another hit piece on J.K. Rowling, spurred on by Ralph Fiennes defending her, Rafe Fiennes defending her, and I think publications that do that type of thing, I don't think they have long left really, because all they're doing is it's a big internal circle jerk. Most people don't agree with this stuff when you get on the outside. People don't think J.K. Rowling's a bigot. They don't know what you're talking about. So I think that the audience for that stuff is going to dwindle even further, and they'll be in a while. Journalism is supposed to be about holding powerful people to account, not the opposite. I mean, I know J.K. Rowling's a billionaire, so quite powerful, but she's been writing from the point of view of a domestic violence survivor, and they're slamming her. It's crazy. So I don't think that's got long left.
Yeah,
I hope.
We'll see. We'll see. I think the golden bridges, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. And I think that is something that when I think about what we call woke over here, you're like, well, people are stuck in this. You need to attack the ideology, but also give people a way out. Way out, so. Give them questions, give them a little bit of place to put their dignity while they maybe change course.
One of my friends is a woman, Claire Graham, and she is she has yes, you've interviewed her probably, yeah. But to explain to people, she is an intersex advocate, has an intersex condition herself. Oh my God, what was the point? You threw me when you said you knew her. My point about... Oh yeah. No, I'll tell you what happened. So I was talking to her one day, and I've admired her for ages and ages. And I said, so how did you get into all this? I mean, how did you start kind of fighting it? And she said, it was from reading your Twitter. So you have someone who's absolutely central to this debate, who I'd admired for years, and turns out, I got her in, so, and I'm seeing a lot of people saying, I used to think this, or I'm a former, well, why can't we just be kind person? And I'm seeing the word former a lot. So I think a lot of people are taking the golden bridge. And you know, unfortunately, it's happening slowly, but you know, there'll be a critical mass eventually, I'm sure.
That sounds optimistic. Is that an Irish trait, or just an aberration in your genetic code?
Yeah, I think Irish are pretty optimistic. Yeah, but I've always been optimistic. I generally think people want to do the right thing, you know, and I think that you can only tell people that 2 + 2 = 5 for so long before eventually they'll rebel, you know. So I'm hoping that will come soon.
Any words of wisdom to wrap up this third interview with the great Graham Linehan?
No, just I don't know, just don't fall for the cool person thing. That's the big thing. Don't think that other people have a handle on things, because often they don't, and you might be the one who has to be the adult in the room, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I
like being cool and having my cool kids club, but I don't like clout. I distrust the cool people. Always have.
Yeah. No, there's very few actually cool people. I'd say
it's cool to be an outsider. Actually, you know, that's the coolest thing to be.
But I'll tell you what real cool bravery. If you brave people, they're my favorite. And I've met so many brave people through this. People who will risk everything to do the right thing. So, you know, bravery. Look out for those people.
I'm going to end it there. You want to say goodbye to the folks at home?
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ben, for talking to me again. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll end it there. Congratulations for reaching the end of the discussion. If you enjoyed it, do be sure to leave a review or a comment or a thumbs up or whatever you need to do to show that glorious algorithm that this is some good stuff. And do be sure to go and check that back catalog, as it is brimming full of fantastic conversations. Links to provide monetary support are down there in the description as well. Have a good night.